Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we're gonna be reviewing Virus by Haken.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
So this is an odd case of an album which I didn't think I had a lot to say about, but as it came, I have a bunch of things that I think about this album in particular. But before we get into any of that, here are some of my favorite bits from this album. So this is the second time we are visiting Haken on the list. Now I will do such a quick reminder right here. So Haken are an English band formed in 2007, but despite being newly and fresh into the prog scene, well considering you have bands which are over 50 years by this point, they have actually garnered a large fan base and have risen to popularity. And today's album, Virus, is their last release, coming out in 2020. Now it is called Virus, and 2020 was basically the year of the outburst of coronavirus, but those two things are basically only coincidental. They didn't mean for it. This album was actually planned a few years ahead, and you can actually tell that because this is the second part of an album that came out in 2019 called Vector. The idea of the virus is a metaphor for the viral infection that occurs on the soul of humans, so with mental diseases and other things like that. This is basically what this album focuses on. Now, although having a pretty understood idea, I don't think that this can be called a concept album. At least it doesn't really hold the same tropes as most known concept albums. I find that this one really doesn't get that idea across in a way that really makes it worthy of that title. But as I mentioned previously, this album is only a half of two albums, so a lot of things that I say in this video might be lacking because I don't know. I've never listened to Vector, the first album, so I don't know, but as it felt to me, this album is pretty okay by itself, although there is a lot of things which really feel like they're missing. But anyway, this album opens up with a track which basically acts as a bridge from the last album to this one, and it's called Prosthetic. Now, this one in particular is more heavy metal than a lot of the things that I've ever heard by Haken, specifically because it has very hard and fast moving drum pedals. It also has a very heavy guitar sound, and there's one thing which I really like about this one, and it's the harmonization between the bass line and the vocals. I think that's something I never really heard before, at least not done in this way, and that's really a cool thing about this song. But as it often happens with progressive metal, not going to the death metal core or stuff like that, just regular progressive metal, I find that there's a lot of parts which really sound the same. I've heard them many times in the past and they're not so unique, and what I mean by that is the parts when there's only, heavy playing, everyone's going heavy, the vocals are like very strenuous and wailing in some way, and honestly these parts, if you know what I mean, I don't find them to be very interesting, and by this point I've kind of grown bored out of listening to these parts, so whenever they came up on this album in particular, I just kind of lost it, and I don't know, that's kind of unfortunate. We do get some interesting tracks on here, so specifically my second favorite from this album has to be the track called Invasion. It's really a lovely heartfelt song which is completely different from the first track. It's really nice that it freshens things up. I like the vocals, I like the way that they're executed. I think I've never heard something like that before, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, go listen to that track, you'll get it. And something about the track Carousel is also pretty nice. I like the fact that it features some djent sort of playing. It's really pretty nice and I liked it a lot, but I do think that this track is completely longer than what it justifies to be, and a lot of it could have been cut away to leave us with a better sounding track overall. But honestly, the point of interest in an album like this has to be the grand epic called Messiah Complex. This one is delivered in 5 separate parts, which you can look at them all as one continuous piece, and honestly, as much as I wanted this one to be grandiose and fantastic and to be the favorite song of Haken by me at least, it kinda didn't do that. I think it's a fine song, it's pretty good, but it's not great. Now of course the idea of a Messiah Complex hinders back to the idea or the conceptual idea of this album being the infection of the soul. Messiah Complex, for those of you who don't know, is basically when a person, someone, sees themselves as being some sort of savior, and this grand epic kind of falls short to me. At first I thought to myself that the 4th part of this epic called the Sect was my favorite, and it is still my favorite, but for an unjust reason, because it basically plagiarizes the same exact lines and melodical composition from their better known song The Cockroach King, which I really liked when I listened to The Mountain, and that song in particular is also some sort of a plagiarizing of Gentle Giant, so I don't know what to think about it. And this grand epic as a whole I think lacks something that this entire album lacks, and that's connection. There's nothing really connecting the parts to one another, and I wish that there was. I think that if they introduced one motif at the beginning, something very memorable, very hook-like, and they would have introduced it once again at the end, it would have given some sort of closure or reprise of sorts, but they didn't really do that. They kind of tried, but they didn't really do that, and honestly I think that it was lacking. I think that the journey of starting this grand epic from the beginning and ending it somewhere wasn't really felt, and that's just a bummer. And going back to my main point about this album, although it is pretty good, like the songs on here, they are good, it misses one crucial point, and that's creating links between songs. If this is going to be a concept album and you have an idea for it, you have to create some links between each song, so I feel like I'm going through a journey. But they didn't do that with the entire album, it wasn't done with the grand epic of the Messiah Complex, and honestly I just find it to be kind of underwhelming. But all in all, I think that this album is pretty good. It isn't great, there are better and there's worse songs on here, but there is nothing which is really less than mediocre on here, so that's kind of fine, I will say. And another thing, and this is probably very controversial, I think that this album is better than The Mountain. I have no idea if you can hear this, but the birds in the background, they're chirping like this is a Disney movie, and I have no idea what's going on out there. Anyway, this is a neat little cover. I like the fact that it's simplistic, I like what it represents, I like the virus found on it, I think it's pretty accurate, and like the hexagon thing is somewhat accurate to how proteins are made. Honestly, I don't really know, it's just something I remember. But maybe a lot of people gave this one a listen because of COVID and because of thinking about viruses subconsciously, so I don't know, it's a good marketing strat. I do find that this one really fits nicely with its predecessor. They both really hinder towards one another in a very cool way, so if you don't know what it looks like, I'm gonna show it right over here on the side next to me. And also I noticed that there's a track on this album called Canary Yellow, and by the way, Canary Yellow is, I think, a lighter version of the yellow used in this cover, so I think this was intentional, maybe not, but probably has been done on some intention. The one thing I really don't like about this cover is the fact that they added these, dust and scratches sort of overlay on top. I think it's kind of cheap. You don't really have to do that on a cover. I think this would have looked fine without that. Just let people accumulate their own dust and scratches on their copies of this album. You don't really have to do it yourself. I think it would look a lot better if it were clean and left as that. So when it comes to the rating, I gave The Mountain a rating of 6 out of 10, and while I might have to reconsider that rating and listen to that album yet again, for now I will have to say that this one is just a bit better and it's getting a rating of 7 out of 10. But that's about it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for tomorrow because we're going to be listening to A Tab in the Ocean by Nectar. Another thing I will add here in the end, if you've reached this far, we were supposed to have a very lovely guest be featured on this album's review, but we couldn't have him on, so he'll be featured in a few days time. So to all of my lovely Patreons who are Clay Walnum and Brian at this moment, I'm sorry you were expecting someone. I told you who it is, but he didn't come. Anyway, if you guys want to support me over on Patreon, you can find the links down in the description of this video or in my about page. But anyway, have a wonderful day guys, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye guys.